Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 7th session of conversations hosted by the World Association for Sexual Health. I'm Elna Rudolph. I'm the president of the next WAS conference to be hosted in South Africa from 9 to 12 September 2021. And I'm co-hosting this series with Esiet from Nigeria, the honorary president of the Congress. Today, our topic is the struggle for comprehensive sexuality education around the world. Obstacles and successes, in proud sponsorship with UNESCO and UNFPA. We announce here today the new technical guidance for out-of-school CSE that Ilya Zhukov from UNFPA will be presenting as well. Please say hello to us in the chat. And we've got participants from all over the world here, and we're also going live on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us, and a special welcome to the WAS members and also all of the new people joining us today. We would like you to ask the questions to the panelists in the Q&A. You will see that the chat gets quite busy. So if you have particular questions for all our wonderful panelists, please put that into the Q&A. This whole series of conversations has been organized and really thought through thoroughly by the team that is organizing the conference. And that is the WAS executive, which I will introduce you shortly, as well as Alain Gihami from France, Eric Janssen from Belgium, Anthony Smith and Marlene Basseman from South Africa. So now I would like to introduce you to our team for today. And I would like for everybody to please switch on their cameras so that I can show you and all of them can say hello to you. So firstly, we've got the president of WAS here, Pedro Nobre. He is in Portugal. And we've got the Secretary General of WAS, Luis Perelman. He is in Mexico. And then our Vice President, Esther Corona, is also one of our moderators today. She's also in Mexico. Our second moderator is Osmo Kontula. He is in Helsinki. And Osmo is also the chair of the Sexuality Education Committee on the WAS Advisory. And then we've got Ilya Zhukov, who is in New Jersey from UNFPA, Margarita Gerouki, who is in Helsinki, Joanna Herat, who is in Paris, and she's from UNESCO, and then Robert Asida, my fellow African from Nairobi, and then Wenli Lui from Beijing. Welcome to all of you, and we are really looking forward to your contributions today. Now I would like to introduce our moderators to you. Michelle, I'd like to ask you to please put up the poll. We've got quite a comprehensive poll, and I'd like you to look at this poll while I'm busy introducing our two moderators today. So Osmo Kontula, PhD, is a Finnish sociologist and sexologist employed as a research professor at the Population Research Institute of the Family Federation of Finland. Dr. Kontula specializes in sex research and sexual science and has authored some 400 publications, of which more than 50 are books authored or edited by him. He's a member of the WAS Advisory Committee and chair of the WAS Sexuality Education Committee. He's also an associate editor of the Journal of Sex Research, and Dr. Kontula is the past president of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sexuality. And then Esther Corona, you all know her already from our webinar series. Esther Corona is a clinical psychologist and vice president of WAS. She has worked in sexuality education, sexual and reproductive health and gender for over 50 years. And there are not many people who have that on their CV. Osmo, firstly, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Elna, for your kind introduction. Well, I'm very happy on behalf of WAS, warmly welcome you all to this WAS Sexuality Education webinar. International organizations such as UNFPA, UNESCO, WHO, and IPPF argue that sexuality education is a core issue for the realization of our human rights. Based on these agreements, every citizen in every nation has the right to education and information about sexuality and sexual and reproductive health. Sexuality education helps to prepare young people for life in general, especially for building and maintaining satisfactory relationships and it contributes to positive development of personality and self-determination. Although there are excellent international guidebooks of sexuality education and well-trained educators around the world, we know how difficult it can be to implement sexuality education at national or local levels. We hope that personal experience of means how to overcome these difficulties that will be presented in our webinar will help and encourage you in your forthcoming work. Sexuality education has been an important part of sexual health promotion work that WAS has conducted already for decades. My colleague and another moderator of this webinar, Esther Corona, has worked for a very long time in WAS to promote and develop sexuality education around the world. WAS has Sexuality Education Committee and Sexuality Education Network that has over 100 sexuality educators around the world. It works both via emails and in Facebook. You are very much welcome to join this network. If you contact me via Facebook or personally, I can invite you as a member of WAS Sexuality Education Network. Soon there will be a first call to apply for the next WAS Education Awards. They are called Excellence and Innovation in Sexuality Education 2021. These awards will be given to the next winners in the next WAS World Congress in Cape Town next year. So you are welcome to apply for these awards. Okay, next I'm introducing our first speaker. She is Margarita Gerouki as an educator and researcher. She is experienced in developing educational materials and courses on sexuality education for primary and secondary school students. She has worked as a teacher and education advisor for the Greek Ministry of Education for more than 20 years. She completed her master's in health sciences and PhD in education in Finland. Currently, she is doing postdoctoral research in the University of Jyväskylä in Department of Political Sciences. Her team received the Award of Excellence and Innovation in Sexuality Education 2019 from the World Association for Sexual Health for their work Play with FRIXOS. Before Margarita starts, I will announce you that, as you have seen, there is poll running during this webinar, so you are very much welcome to respond to those poll questions. But now, over to Margarita, whose title is CSE in Greece, the story of FRIXOS. Margarita, welcome.
Hello, thank you. The first time sex education was mentioned in Greece was in 1964, when the General Secretary of the Ministry of Education said that sex education is very important and promised that the issue will be discussed soon. Fast forward 36 years, in 2000, the first materials on sexuality education for upper secondary students were published by the Ministry of Education through EU funding. By then, I was teaching for 6 years. It was clear that my students had a deep interest on issues that belong to what we call relationships and sexuality education. However, it was also clear that as a teacher, I was not prepared to tackle any of this. Sex education became an important topic for me, well worth the 4,000 kilometers to relocate from Greece to Finland in order to study it. In 2004, I completed studies in health sciences in the University of Jyväskylä. My master was about Greek teachers' opinions on sex education. By that time, we had sex education material for lower secondary as well, published by the Ministry of Education with EU funding. Moreover, sex education was listed as a topic for health education interventions in our national curriculum. While researching, I noticed that those books for the secondary were not accessible. I mean, it looked like that the ministry spent money to produce the materials and then store them as far from schools as possible. As my research showed, the vast majority of teachers in Greece felt that comprehensive sex education was very important. However, they also felt that they were not able to teach it for very specific reasons. They didn't have pre or in-service training. They didn't have books. By 2008, the ministry, through EU funding, has published materials for the primary as well, but you can guess their fate. Additionally, teachers were not convinced that they had the right to teach sex education due to contradicting messages. Greek teachers were absolutely right. Very few universities, even now, offer courses on sexuality and gender education. In addition, there is hardly any reference on school textbooks for subjects related to sex education, a few biological facts at the most. I'll give you an example. We know the importance of textbooks in teaching. On the first primary grade, Greek teachers should discuss the body. In their textbooks, there is a drawing of a boy and a girl wearing their swimming costumes. For the girl, not even a bikini. So what is the message here? That babies are born with swimming suits? The teachers take it as do not discuss the genitals as body parts. Greek teachers feel that the CSE is very important, however, less than 3% of them implement such teaching. It is true, when teachers receive contradicting messages, they choose to do nothing. In the words of the Greek teachers, they are not the ones to take the snake out of its nest. As a teacher and researcher, I start exploring sex education, believing rather naively in the health message. That is, I thought that when you explain that school sex education is not Kama Sutra, rather a systematic effort to encourage healthy and safe choices in life, people will understand, agree, and we will live happily ever after. The first lesson from the field is that sex education is less about education and more about politics, that is power and control. For 20 years, a few Greek ministers of education announced the introduction of sex education as a school subject. Their intentions were like fireworks, made an impression and fade away fast. Because following their announcements, the old men in black and their fan clubs start objecting. And if you are wondering what right these people have, provided that Greece is a secular European country, well, the full title is Ministry of National Education and Religious Affairs. And by religious affairs, we mean the Greek Orthodox Christian religion. The Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, is against sex education. For example, in the website of the Piraeus Metropolis, a big parish in Attica, sex education is discussed in the page about heresies and cults. In my PhD, I wrote that the church is important for votes, and Greek politicians have found a very nice way to comply with both secular, represented by EU, and religious forces. Sex education is present in the official papers and absent from schools for 20 years. And then came FRIXOS. I'll give you the background. 1st of December 2011, Rethymno, our city of 35,000 people, was shocked with the arrest of a primary school teacher and highly esteemed basketball coach for the junior team. He was accused and later convicted for sexually abusing, going on for years, of 36 young boys. Everybody was devastated. People were accusing each other, and many of them the victims. I wrote an opinion article stating the obvious. We cannot have sexually healthy children if we do not have comprehensive sex education. This is how Play with FRIXOS was created by me, Elena Vitalaki, Athina Triamataki, and Despina Mavraki, and the support of the city of Rethymno. FRIXOS, a hedgehog that sends letters and activities to preschool and early primary school kids and teach about the body and safe relations. In 2015, we pilot tested the materials in Rethymno, and results were very promising. During the pilot test and the following years, we applied to the Ministry of Education to get permission to use our materials in class. We got 5 such permissions. Then, 2017, something else happened. 4 preschool teachers in Hania of Crete, 80 kilometers from Rethymno, were accused for sexually abusing a student. They did so by teaching the genitals, according to the father of the child who filed the charges. This person did not provide any other proof of his words whatsoever. On the contrary, in the preliminary investigation, about 15 teachers, advisors, even union members gave statements that the materials teachers used were approved and it is within the curriculum to teach the genitals. What did I say about contradictory messages? What greater killjoy if you see your colleagues taken to court for teaching? I believe that playing with FRIXOS was good. I thought that the chance of a greater recognition might help the teacher's court case as well. I applied for the WAS Award, Excellence Innovation in Sex Education, and FRIXOS got it. Ironically, the teacher's trial was scheduled the same week we were in Mexico to get our award. The court trial was postponed and still pending. The people of Rethymno who had embraced FRIXOS were full of pride. Our award plate decorates the municipality hall, as a matter of fact. The local press recorded the contradiction. Teachers receiving a prestigious award, teachers are taking to court for the same work. The national news got the story. By the time we were back from Mexico, there was huge publicity. Because of FRIXOS, comprehensive sex education became the topic. Many teachers and parents demanding a clearer path towards teaching. The new Minister of Education, we had a change in government meanwhile, even announced a pilot sex education program. Happy ending? No. Some more interesting things followed. First of all, you should expect that the minister will publicly congratulate 4 teachers, volunteers for such an achievement. The silence from the ministry was and still is deafening. Moreover, there was problem with the approval of the material for class teaching. By October 2019, we had the approval, the 5th in 5 years, but then the ministry asked for re-evaluation. The new approval was delayed, and at the same time, people close to the church were messing with teachers. If a teacher wanted to use FRIXOS, someone was asking for the official approval, and since the ministry was not sending the approval, teachers were threatened if they wanted to proceed. Teachers stayed put. Fast forward, end of January 2020. The General Secretary of the Ministry of Education, who didn't sign FRIXOS reapproval for 3 months, the same person who represents the ministry in UNESCO, signed an invitation for schools to participate in a conference about contemporary education and Greek Orthodox tradition organized by a controversial association of parents, Orthodox Christian parents. This association has been active for years against comprehensive sex education, containing UNESCO's technical guidance, among other things. Our team made a public statement accusing the ministry for blocking comprehensive sex education. And the publicity was so big that the approval was within a week in the schools. Nevertheless, those groups have been mobilized. They are against abortion, against comprehensive sex education, targeting FRIXOS, picturing sex educators as people who intend to corrupt children and threaten traditional values. An interesting keynote last year in Mexico came from Neil Data from the EU Parliament. He presented the religious extremist vision to mobilize European societies against human rights on sexuality and reproduction. We see that work in progress in Greece. The EU initiative, Mom, Dad, and Kids, promoting traditional families, is fully operative. The second lesson from the field as educator is about activism. We created Accept, with an X, an NGO to promote CSE. This year, FRIXOS did not get an approval from the Ministry of Education. When we filed for one, they asked as a condition of approval the copyright of our work, and we withdraw our application. We know what is happening to sex education material when the ministry is in charge. Through Accept, we seek collaboration to promote inclusive, comprehensive sexuality education. Our motto is safe, carefree children presently. And this is not a heresy or a cult. This is teachers doing their job. Thank you.
Margarita, thank you for your excellent presentation. I think that you are a real great role model in sexuality education for all of us around the world. Thank you so much.
Really. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
And now over to Esther, who will introduce our next speaker.
I'm so happy to be here and so excited about all this fantastic panel. And having heard now from civil society organization, now we go into academia and government in China. And for this, we have today Wenli Liu, and I'm not going to read all her fantastic curriculum, which can be shown at the chat box, and you can also see in Facebook and was Facebook. I'm only going to say that Wenli Liu works at the Normal University of Beijing in China, and she has produced materials for all over China and she has a fantastic experience. She has a PhD from, I think it's Nevada University, but as I say, her work has been really groundbreaking in such a big country and such a challenging setting. So Wenli, over to you. Please do give us an overview of what is going on in China.
Okay, thank you for Esther's introduction. Now I share my PowerPoint. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share our research experience about the school-based comprehensive sexuality education in China. Before my presentation, I would like to introduce myself briefly. I started to research about sexuality education in 1988 when I was a graduate student at Beijing Normal University. I went to US to finish my PhD degree in University of Nebraska and worked in Humboldt State University as an assistant professor. And then I came back to China 2005. After that, I developed the curriculum-based CSE for primary school, preschool, and middle school, and do a lot of research. And today I will present three aspects like research about CSE, policy advocacy challenges, and challenges we face in CSE in China. And the first one, we have done a research about CSE in China. Like we start in 2007 to develop the curriculum-based CSE for primary school, and for preschool in 2013, and for middle school 2015. And the research about the evaluation tools from 2017, and also we developed the standards for middle school teachers to teach CSE, and we developed technical guidance on sexuality education for basic education. This year, we start this work. And for CSE, as you know, international technical guidance to talk about what the CSE is, it's really clear to say CSE is a curriculum-based process to teaching and learning about cognitive, emotional, physical, and social development to teach knowledge, skills, and attitudes and values. And this is the two key concepts about CSE, and we developed the curriculum-based CSE, follow these key concepts. This is the picture books we developed for preschool, and this is the books, and we have a total 9 books. We have 9 topics like human body, reproduction, sexuality and behavior, emotions, relationships, sexuality and safety, sexuality and rights, gender equality, and sexuality, culture, and values. This is the class look like in preschool. Students very joined our teaching activities, and they learn a lot about sexuality in preschool. And these are the textbook for primary school we developed and published in 2010 and 2017. Totally we use 7 years to finish all the books. And these textbooks for middle schools, this is ongoing project. We will finish by next year, hopefully. And this we discuss about how to teach CSE in middle school with teachers, and this is the classroom. And also we use the many teaching activities to teach CSE. I just take the primary school curriculum-based CSE as an example to show how we do the work. And this is curriculum-based CSE development process. We followed this circle to develop educational materials and to train teachers and parents, observe the class, and do the evaluation. Then we revise the educational materials, the one circle by one circle to repeat to develop our educational materials. This is the CSE in preschool, and the class hours is about 6 class hours in each semester, and we teach 72 class hours from grade 1 to grade 12. We followed the domestic guidelines like the health education and physical education standards, and also the international technical guidance and the standards for sexual education in Europe. And this is the framework of textbooks for primary school, like the family and friends, life skills, gender and rights, human development, sexuality and health behavior, and also sexual and reproductive health. We have 6 key concepts. And this the teaching practice. You can see the children like our class very much and very enjoying the class activities. And also we did a lot of evaluation on effectiveness of CSE, these student questionnaires. And I take one study to see how we do the comparative 2 groups. The one group received CSE from grade 1 to grade 6, the whole 6 years, and another group had no CSE. And in many topics, we teach students and also focus on equity and equality issues. And like the gender rights and the human development, this is a task we ask students to do. And this result, CSE witnessed the effect of in-group bias on trust and fairness. And this the publications in English from 2011 to this year. And these are publications in evaluation of CSE in Chinese last year. And we also did work for policy advocacy on CSE, like we started to submit a proposal from 2014. And every year we submit our proposal and to bring the CSE into basic education in 2019, we proposed this proposal. And very good news in our new law of People's Republic of China on the protection of minors, to see school and preschool should provide age-appropriate sexuality education for minors. This is a very good start to promote sexuality education in schools in China in the future. And also we face many challenges in CSE research, both in research and in implementation. And like the challenges technically, we lack of class hours for CSE in school and lack the trained qualified teachers to teach CSE, and like official textbooks. We have no domestic guidance on CSE, and also the evaluation tools to evaluate the CSE effectiveness. And also we face challenge culturally, because sexuality is a very sensitive topic in China, as you know, not just in China and in many countries. Like in March 2017, we will discuss about our textbooks for primary school, and some people said, is that the age appropriate to teach young children about sexuality issue, like the reproductive system? Should we use the scientific terms like the vagina, penis, and also somebody concerned how to talk about the LGBT issues in primary school. We face these challenges, but we have done a lot of work and to promote CSE in China. Hopefully, in the future, we learn the best practice in many other countries and share our experience with others. We can work together to promote CSE in the whole world. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Wenli, for such a comprehensive presentation and for giving us such a good overview of all the different steps involved in implementing CSE in any given setting, and in such a challenging country because of its population, its diversity as China. And what you have just shared about these recent developments is very exciting. And we are all looking forward to hearing much more from you, and of course, sharing your experience and exchanging what is going on. Thank you very much, Wenli. Over to Osmo, please.
Okay, thank you, Esther. Now I'm introducing our third speaker. He is Robert Acera from Nairobi, Kenya. He is the program coordinator at the Network for Adolescents and Youth of Africa. He has a Bachelor of Science in Population Health and a Master's in Development Communication. He has over 8 years experience in policy engagement at the national, regional, and international levels on adolescent and youth sexual and reproductive health and rights, with a key focus on vulnerable and marginalized groups, including young people and sexual and gender minorities. Robert has also served as a youth advisor of Kenya government to the United Nations Commission on Population and Development. Now, Robert, over to you.
Thank you so much, Osmo, for that introduction. Great. So my presentation will be focusing on youth perspectives for comprehensive sexuality education around the world. And as we are all aware, most states have actually signed and ratified key instruments that provide for the right to health and the right to education, including comprehensive sexuality education. So, for example, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, all these provide for the right to the highest attainable standard of health and the right to the highest standard, the right to education. So, as you can see, comprehensive sexuality education is therefore not a new right that is trying to be created, but it is a right that can be derived from the other rights that have been ratified and signed by the different countries. So when we hear about comprehensive sexuality education, for most people, it's either something on LGBT. We hear it's an attack, whether it's an attack on our values, an attack on our ways of life. For some, we hear that it's about decision-making and how young people can be able to make decisions. Some have described comprehensive sexuality education as controversial, others have called it Western, others have called it issues around sex. But there is no definition around comprehensive sexuality education that best describes comprehensive sexuality education than the struggle. Because wherever you are in the world, people are at different levels. We have countries that have laws and policies on comprehensive sexuality education. And we also have countries that have these laws, but they're not being implemented. We have countries that do not have these laws or policies. So different countries are at different levels. And wherever levels these different countries are at, the truth is that it's always a struggle to make sure that the gains that have so far been recognized and registered for comprehensive sexuality education do not and are not rolled back. So if you look at the statistics that we hear every day about young people, we know that young people are most disproportionately affected by sexual and reproductive health and rights challenges. Talk about issues around teenage pregnancy, talk about issues around unsafe abortion, talk about issues, all these kind of issues. The people who are mostly affected are young people. Yet, these young people do not, in most cases, do not have access to comprehensive sexuality education that can be able to help them make informed decisions on their sexuality. And CSE actually ensures that young people learn about cognitive, physical, and social aspects of sexuality. So it's a broad range of learning on issues around sexuality. And when these young people are able to learn about their sexuality, then they are able to get the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to help them realize the health, well-being, and dignity. And we also know that from evidence that has been, from research and from evidence and from learnings that have been generated, that comprehensive sexuality education actually helps young people to develop respectful relationships. And these are not just sexual relationships, this also includes social relationships. How do young people relate with other young people, for example? How do they relate with people in the society? And comprehensive sexuality education is also important that it enables young people to be able to understand their rights. And when young people understand their rights, then they are able to action their rights. There have been so many myths that have been peddled around comprehensive sexuality education. But the truth is that these myths have been debunked by facts that have been, research has been done that have really shown that CSE is important, not just in ensuring that one of the biggest critics that we hear about comprehensive sexuality education is that it encourages young people to have sex. If you look at the evidence, and the evidence actually points us that young people who have undergone comprehensive sexuality education actually delay the first time that they have sex. We also hear, and from especially from African countries like we come from, you hear that CSE is about teaching young people the mechanics of having sex. But that reduces sexuality to just sex. Sex is just a small part. Sexuality includes very many other things, and also the information on comprehensive sexuality education, just like in most learning, is age appropriate, so it's incremental. So the kind of information you give, for example, grade 5 students is not the same as you give to grade 2 or grade 1. And also there is the notion that CSE is a new right, yet we know that our countries have signed to different conventions, whether they be global conventions or regional conventions. In Africa, for example, there is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights that provide for the rights to health, for example, the rights to education, for example. So comprehensive sexuality education in itself is not a new right. It is a right that has been gotten from the other rights that we have. And also there is a perception that comprehensive sexuality education is at odds with abstinence. Yet we know very well that there's evidence that abstinence-only education is not effective. So if you look at, and I will give you an example of Africa, for example, the Ministers of Education of Africa in 2013 signed the Eastern and Southern Africa Ministerial Commitment on Comprehensive Sexuality Education, where they recognized the dire situation of young people's SRHR, and they said that they will invest in comprehensive sexuality education and provide for youth-friendly services in Africa. So this is an African document, and contrary to most opinion around comprehensive sexuality that is a Western concept, we can see that even domestic instruments in Africa actually provide for comprehensive sexuality education. So comprehensive sexuality education has indeed faced several obstacles. And one of them is that there is inadequate implementation of existing instruments on comprehensive sexuality education. So I've given you the example of the Ministerial Commitment on Comprehensive Sexuality Education in Africa, in East and Southern Africa, which is not being implemented. We have countries that have policies, like Kenya, we have policies that provide for comprehensive sexuality education, yet this has not been actualized. We also have cultural and ideological opposition to CSE, and then we also have challenges of lack of harmonized guidelines, whereby different organizations in different countries use different guidelines. And then there's also the inadequate evidence on comprehensive sexuality education. And one of the biggest challenges is the issue around inadequate meaningful engagement of young people. Because in most cases, young people are seen as people to receive the CSE and not as active people who have a key role in designing the programs that they want. Apart from the obstacles, there have also been key successes that we have realized around the world, and mostly in Africa, for example. we have seen that we have had progressive outcome documents from regional and international forums, for example, key treaty monitoring bodies, key accountability mechanisms have reiterated the critical need for comprehensive sexuality education. We've also seen policy frameworks at national level, and we've also seen emerging champions on comprehensive sexuality education, as well as public support. People just recognizing that CSE is indeed critical in the formation and development of young people and actively supporting comprehensive sexuality education. So what are some of the opportunities that we can still be able to use to advance comprehensive sexuality education? It's very important that we continue to engage with the regional and international accountability mechanisms, for example, treaty monitoring bodies, the Universal Periodic Review. At the African level, for example, there is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, there is the East African Legislative Assembly. All these processes can enable us to be able to strengthen comprehensive sexuality education. It's also important to link and learn from one another. For example, we've seen from Greece, the story around Greece, for example, how can Kenya learn from Greece? And then we can also see issues around strengthening evidence, and then we can also be able to conduct public campaigns for CSE. So what are some of the most critical things as I finish? It's important that we integrate comprehensive sexuality education into the school curriculum. It's important that we develop national guidelines. It is very, very important that we strengthen multi-sectoral coordination, because CSE is not just an issue of the Ministry of Education. Where is the Ministry of Health, for example? Where is the Ministry of Gender and Youth? It's also very important that we train teachers, because if the teachers don't have the capacity to train, to deliver the CSE, then even the young people are not able to get the best CSE. And then it's also important that we are able to allocate budgets and resources in delivering CSE, as well as strengthen meaningful adolescent and youth participation in the decision-making process, so that if young people are involved in designing the CSE process, then the CSE curriculums become more relevant to the young people, more acceptable to the young people, and therefore more implementable. So thank you very much.
So Robert, thank you so much. This was very inspiring to listen to your presentation. And it reminded me how important is evidence-based of sexuality education when you presented your table of myths and facts. So even though we have already a lot of facts, but we still need more to overcome these myths that you presented. So thank you very much. And now over to Esther.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robert, for bringing us the voice of youth through your wide network. Now we are going to go into a very, very important and exciting segment in this session, because we are going to have to bring in precisely the voice of international organizations through Joanna Herod from UNESCO, and also from Ilya Sukov from UNFPA. And I'm also acknowledging WHO, World Health Organization, with Chandramouli, who's attending from virtually through the air, through cyberspace. Our next presenter is Joanna Herod. She has been working in UNESCO since 2010, providing policy and technical leadership to improve health and well-being for young people through education. She's really passionate and really she's one of our greatest champions in about comprehensive sexuality education, school-related gender-based violence, and the role of education in improving adolescent sexual and reproductive health. She was really one of the persons who pushed forward and who has done a great work in spreading the international technical guidance on sexuality education, which, as you can see, and you have seen through the presentations, we are all using and adopting maybe to our local settings. So, Joanna, over to you. We are so pleased to have you and UNESCO here in this session.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Esther. And we are very excited to be here with so many colleagues from around the world today to talk about CSE. And whilst over the last couple of years, we have spoken a lot about the international technical guidance, Today, I'm actually going to talk about something slightly different. Today, I'm going to talk about the importance of building support and addressing resistance to CSE, as the subject of this session would suggest. And I want to build on some of the reflections that we've had recently at UNESCO amongst our UN partners, but also with our civil society and youth partners, in some of the learnings, I think, that and the observations that we've made recently. So over the past few years, as UN agencies and our partners working in the area of sexual and reproductive health and rights and education and health and gender, we've all noted with concern these kind of recurring ideological attacks, which are against people and platforms who are advocating for SRHR and gender equality, but also some of the attacks against UN agencies, against individual organizations, and against activists who are supporting policy and programs in these areas. So the opposition, this opposition isn't in and of itself a new phenomenon, but it does seem to be a bit more frequent, and it definitely seems to be more coordinated in recent years. And this strategic targeting has had really serious effects on political frameworks at the international level, but also national and subnational level program implementation. And of course, as we've heard from some of our colleagues, what's happening is that this is threatening the advances that have really been made by countries. And I think we really need to recognize how far many countries have moved towards the realization of sexual and reproductive health and rights, including CSE. But those are being undermined, these advances, specifically around the access to SRH information and services, which means that we're seeing the undermining of universal values and human rights, particularly around the principles of non-discrimination and inclusion and gender equality. So within this whole paradigm of opposition and resistance and the promotion of so-called family values, which are apparently in opposition to many of the values of sexual and reproductive health and rights and diversity that I think many people on this call are working towards, CSE itself is a really specific flashpoint for the kind of conservative backlash or the pushback, because it's representing this very challenging intersection of young people, sex, reproductive health, sexual rights, gender, power, of course. And so in recent years, we've seen that CSE has become increasingly politicized. In fact, just as it has become more kind of recognized and organized, and there's greater kind of technical understanding and evidence, at the same time, we've seen more opposition. And it's being politicized in the intergovernmental dialogues, in the agreements at the UN level between countries, but also at the country level. So today, I'm just going to talk about a couple of reflections and observations that we've had around opposition. So if I could have the next slide, please. So I think before listening to the presenters who've just come before me, what I thought were the key to successful integration and scale up of CSE really were about collaboration and contextualization. But actually, I think what I've realized, particularly listening to Margarita and Wen Lee, is that it is perseverance and staying in the game for a long time. And I really just admire from all of the presentations we've just heard that perseverance and that commitment. But I do think these questions of collaboration and context are also so important. So what we need to be thinking about is about building support and nurturing the environment where CSE can take hold and can flourish. So by collaboration, I mean the building of the long-term relationships with the key government and other stakeholders, which helps to build a supportive network of individuals and institutions, which allows for sustainability, but then also being contextual so that the CSE that's delivered is relevant and meaningful for the lives of young people, and that then the communities around those young people are more likely to accept and support that CSE because it's relevant for young people. So as many of the speakers have already mentioned, it's of course critical to raise awareness of the importance of CSE amongst a really diverse group of stakeholders. We mean I think we can safely say that meaningful dialogue is what we're talking about here. So from our experience, we know that working with the Ministry of Education is a first port of call. That's what we do. But invariably, we need to make sure that the Ministry of Health is there as well, because many of the outcomes are health related. But we also need to work with teachers. We need to make sure that parents, community members, and really importantly, religious leaders are involved in the early discussions, in the elaboration of curriculum, and then also in the continuation of the implementation of CSE. So for example, in Namibia, there's been some recent opposition to CSE. The program has been in place for many years, but we've seen a flare-up of resistance. We also have had a very long and intense process of working with different stakeholders. So it was very easy to then reach out to those stakeholders within the ministries, but also to the champions for CSE, such as the First Lady of Namibia, who has been a long-standing champion for CSE because of her commitment to girls' education and to preventing pregnancy amongst adolescent girls. And so the UN was able to support dialogue between ministries and to represent the evidence to show that CSE was helpful, not harmful. And at the same time, civil society and young people and the media were able to work on messaging to the community members and to the parents and the religious communities who were very concerned by CSE. And ultimately, what we've just seen in Namibia in the last 2 weeks is a reaffirmation from the government of their commitment to CSE. So in a sense, this kind of ideological attack came in, the country explored, there was dialogue, and the end result was something more positive. So that's a great success story. Different countries have experienced opposition differently, but I think what we saw in Namibia was that only because of that long investment in dialogue and collaboration and context were we able to have a successful result. Can I have the next slide, please? So when we step back from the country level and think about how to deal with opposition when it happens, I think the first thing we need to be really clear on is understanding more about this resistance. Where's it coming from? Who is resisting? Where is the opposition? And what's motivating their actions? So it appears at the moment the opposition to CSE is growing or more coordinated. It's definitely got more resources behind it and it's more strategic. The opposition counter-narratives are often actually coming from well-funded, Western-led groups who are building on or provoking, in some cases, existing indigenous concerns about SRHR. So they're kind of there's outsiders coming in, playing on pockets of uncertainty or resistance to issues of gender, sexuality, and rights. And so then the opposition tactics are to use quite varied. There's confusion, there's panic, there's fear-mongering, but also reframing what CSE might be. And also, as we have just heard, quite often sharing incorrect information about the impacts of CSE and also being very emotional. So one of the things that we have learned in recent years is that from the UN's perspective, and for many of us as researchers and who do our work based on evidence, is that our focus on evidence-based advocacy is actually not always effective in countering some of the messages coming from those who resist CSE, because those messages are more values-based and speak to the heart. So I think all of us need to think a little bit more about how we frame our messages and how we help people to understand the positive values of CSE, including the positive family values around respect and relationships and dignity. I think it's important to recognise that opposition is not homogenous. Different people are worried about CSE for different reasons, and we really need to listen to those differences. But we also need to focus on our common goal. And I actually won't try to reiterate the really fantastic presentation that we just had, which really clearly stated, what the benefits of CSE are for young people in terms of realising their rights, but living healthy lives, communicating better, and having the critical thinking skills to make decisions about their life. So I would say that by working together and joining forces and voices as an international community in collaboration with our partners at regional and country level, we can really do a lot more to ensure that the world does see a CSE community as united in our efforts to uphold the right to information and education of children and adolescents about their bodies, sexuality, and relationships. And by doing this, we should be able to counter the resistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for focusing on this issue, which is so important all over the world, because we have been experiencing this kind of resistances for a very long time all over the world, and also for presenting strategies to overcome these resistances. Now we have, I think, a very good set of good practices and how on local conditions we can do it. So thank you very much for bringing this to the forum and for giving us and guiding us and providing all the guidance that UNESCO is giving us in this area. And right now, thank you. And now we're going from in school to out of school. And this is a great recognition that although all over the world, many children and young people go to school, there's a very large population of excluded young people, children, and I would say even adults and older age people. So to overcome this vacuum, UNFPA developed in collaboration with other UN agencies. This is a joint effort and a joint endeavor, the out of school comprehensive sexuality education guidance, and which were presented last week. And Ilya Sukov will now give us a talk on this. And Ilya is he's the global focal point on CSE and leads the planning, development, and implementation of these CSE out-of-school programs. He's also a UNFPA focal point for sexual health and reproductive health programming with young key populations. This is especially very important because there are among these excluded groups. And when we are talking about quality education, we're talking about inclusive education. So you want to know more about Ilya? We'll present his full CV in our chat box. So Ilya, please, can you present us this new tool that we have to work with? Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Please do not share my whole CV, just maybe a couple of lines. But yeah, to be serious, so thank you so much, Esther, for having me here today. And this is really the great honor for me to speak with such prominent experts in sexuality education as Margarita, as Wenli, as Robert, and of course, as my partner in crime, and I should say my partner in chief, Joanna from UNESCO. Yeah, and I'm very excited to speak in front of almost 200 people all over the world. And as Esther mentioned, I will speak about out of school CSE international guidance, but I will speak about this not only because it was just launched, as Esther said last week, but because of a couple of other reasons. So on the one hand, of course, we do understand that each of our publication, each of our article or presentation, like in 99% will be, attacked by opposition or will be resisted from some groups or from some organizations. But at the same time, this guidance is based on the evidence. And I remember that in the presentation of Robert, he mentioned that lack of evidence is one of the obstacles which we have today. So definitely this guidance provides the evidence which we can use to address opposition and to address resistance to comprehensive sexuality education. At the same time, as Joanna said, we sometimes we don't know, or we need to frame how to put together positive values of comprehensive sexuality education and how to deliver it to the outside world, you know, from this circle of experts and stakeholders. So this guidance on out-of-school sexuality education also will give this opportunity to give concrete examples, concrete wording, how to speak to the world about CSE in general and specifically out-of-school sexuality education. And of course, when we started to work on this guidance 4 years ago, no one could imagine that in 2020 we will have a pandemic of COVID-19. But as we see now, so the launch of the guidance, of this guidance, is so in time because it's also provide information and practical advice and evidence how to deliver sexuality education in times of lockdown. So it can be used not only for out of school, but as well as for in-school comprehensive sexuality education in such times as we have now. So let me share my screen to show you some slides. So as Esther said, so this guidance, despite UNFPA led to develop this guidance, it's the joint product of several UN agencies, other organizations and partners. But at the beginning, I should say that in UNFPA, we have our strategy, our global strategy with a focus on adolescent and youth, and we call it My Body, My Life, My World. And comprehensive sexuality education is under the second pillar of this strategy, My Life. And by this, here in UNFPA, we emphasize respect to adolescents' agency and autonomy, partnering with them rather than serving them as passive beneficiaries. So it's also some kind of I'm echoing what Robert said about young people, about adolescents who needs to be the part of the process, who need to be involved in the development of our policies, who need to be involved in implementation of comprehensive sexuality education. And actually that was one of the ground principle of developing this guidance, as well as of implementation of out-of-school comprehensive sexuality education by UNFPA. As our UNFPA Executive Director, Dr. Natalia Kanem said, the guidance complements and refers to this famous International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, ITGSE, which we launched in 2018, the work was led by UNESCO and coordinated by Joanna, who spoke before me. And once again, out-of-school comprehensive sexuality guidance is not a separate publication. It complements, it's complementary publication to the standards which have been included in the revised guidance on sexuality education. So as I said, out-of-school CSE guidance informed by evidence and grounded in a human rights approach. This out-of-school guidance provides concrete guidelines and recommendations to ensure that the most vulnerable young people receive information that enables them to develop the knowledge and skills they need to make informed choices about their sexual and reproductive health and rights. A couple of words about the purpose of the guidance. First of all, I should name all collaborating partners who've been involved in the development of the this guidance. First of all, it's UNESCO, then of course World Health Organization, WHO, UNICEF, and UNH Secretariat. And out-of-school CSE guidance offers more in-depth programmatic guidance on how to develop CSE programs that are appropriate and safe for different groups of children and young people, especially those who left behind. So in this guidance, we define out-of-school comprehensive sexuality education as not being delivered at school to students as a part of the school curriculum, whether within or outside the regular school timetable. Delivering quality comprehensive sexuality education in an out-of-school setting is a curriculum-based process. Again, nothing different from our umbrella of comprehensive sexuality education in general, which you can find in ITGSE. So it's a curriculum-based process, and it could be delivered at youth centers, refugee camps, health clinics, detention centers, or religious institutions. Also, it follows the same objective than the comprehensive sexuality education provided in school, as it aims to equip children and young people with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that will empower them to realize their health, well-being, and dignity. So whom this guidance for? For international and national civil society organizations, youth organizations, community-based organizations, government and institutions, and United Nations agencies. Couple of words about young populations, young people who are included in the guidance. You see the whole list on your screen, and I think never before we paid such detailed attention, and we never been focused to all of this specific group of young people with disabilities, and we address different types of disabilities, their accordance with the classification from the World Health Organization. Young people in humanitarian settings, indigenous young people, young lesbians, gay and bisexual people, young transgender people, young intersex people, young people living with HIV, young people who use drugs, young people who sell sex, and young people in detention. There are three sections in the guidance. The first one provides an overview of out-of-school CSE, including definitions, goals, rules, etc. Second section presents guidance for developing and implementing out-of-school CSE in general, as well as role of peer education, involving parents and guardians, and using technology. This is extremely important nowadays in time of pandemic. And section 3 is focused on these groups of young people, which you could see on the previous slide. So I will share right now in the chat box links to the website of UNFPA, where you can find this guidance, as well as technical briefs developed based on this guidance, and which is specifically focused how to deliver CSE beyond classroom in the time of pandemic COVID-19. And the last thing, despite we launched the guidance only last week, we're already at the end of the second year of testing this guidance in 5 countries all over the world. And hopefully by the next year, we will have practical recommendations how to deliver out-of-school CSE education in different countries, depending on political, cultural, or religious background there. So I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Ilya, thank you so much. And thank you again for addressing all these young populations which are, outside in the fringe in many cases. And also for bringing in the problem that we have now is that most of education is out of school right now because it's happening in homes through either platforms or television or whatever. But I mean, we really have to think how COVID will affect us, and how will it affect in school and out of school, and how we can join these approaches to really address this coming problem of what will happen when young people and children return to classrooms. I think it's a great opportunity because it has also brought to the fore technology, but at the same time, it's one of the greatest challenges that we have at this time. Thank you very much, Ilya, and thank you to all our panelists. And we have an enormous group of questions which revolve about different issues. So Osmo, could you present one of two of them, and I will try to sort of group them together for our panelists. Osmo, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Esther. I was watching the questions that our webinar participants have been sending, and here is, I think, very important question to you, Anna. So, what approaches would you suggest for successful engaging parents and teachers, and what approaches have been successful in engaging religious leaders? So, how to get our people involved with sex education?
It's a really great question. And I think really one has to think at every stage of the development and then the implementation of CSE, how parents in general and religious leaders and also practicing members of faith communities can be engaged by, sometimes it's by hearing messages, making sure that discussions on the radio, in the newspapers, are talking about the importance of young people knowing about their bodies, knowing about puberty, preventing pregnancy, and so on. And then there's also more structured ways of making sure that people are involved. Every country, there are parents' associations, just as there are teachers' associations. There are associations of religious bodies. And so, for example, at the stage of curriculum development, or in many countries, there is already a curriculum and it is being reviewed usually around every 8 years. It's really important to make sure that a couple of different members, representative members from parents' groups and faith-based organizations, are part of that process, so that their perspectives can be part of that, but also that they take responsibility that they're representing a constituent during that process. But I'm sure that there are colleagues working at country level who have some interesting examples to share as well. But we have definitely seen it being done quite successfully. UNESCO developed in Eastern and Southern Africa in the last couple of years a toolkit for working with faith leaders to talk about CSE, to understand which elements of different faiths are supportive of some of the different values within CSE. And that's been very helpful in promoting some of that dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another big theme that has come up in the Q&A is youth participation, youth involvement. For instance, here we have a very interesting question about the hierarchical relationship between youth and also the providers and delivers of CSE, and how that can affect all the process. And also, how do you involve young people? What are the strategies that have been used to really involve young people? And as was said before, not only as passive participants, but also as active as participants in the development of CSE. Robert, could you briefly comment on what are your experiences on this area?
Thank you for that very important question. And generally, the issue around youth participation is quite it's a big issue because there's youth participation and there's also meaningful youth participation. So then how is that engagement meaningful? Because we've seen so far there have been some engagement that has been very tokenistic or manipulative. What we have seen that can work in terms of meaningful youth participation is at the very first one is at the assessment level. For example, when you're doing a program on CSE, for example, do you ask young people what they would want to see in that curriculum? That is the first. What is most important to them, for example? How do they want that? What kind of methodology do they want for the training, for example? Do they want one-on-one, for example? Do they want education through peer providers? Do they want internet-based models? How do they want their parents, for example, to be involved? Who do they want to be involved? And so I think the most important thing is asking young people a simple question is, what do you want? And how do you want it? And when we have seen that when we ask young people those kind of questions, then we are able to get great examples of innovative ways as well as relevant ways of engaging young people. The second one is also generally around the issue of safe space, for example. How is this space safe for young people to engage? Because young people can be able to provide their views and fear victimization, for example, or they can be like, it's so and so who said this, and therefore other young people could be afraid of airing their views. So it's important to see whether it's through anonymization, for example, or just creating a safe space where young people feel like they are not threatened and they can be able to present their views in a friendly space, in a space whereby they think that their views also have value.
Thank you, Robert. Osmo.
Yes, can I raise question to Wenli? Because here in our list is Hans Olsson from Sweden asking, it's a kind of questions, limitations of sex education in China. So for example, can you speak about masturbation or LGBTQ questions in China?
Okay, thanks for the questions. This is a good question. Masturbation is a very sensitive topic in China, especially for young children to learn about that. In my textbook for primary school, we teach about masturbation in grade 5th. Some parents concerned about my children don't know what masturbation is. If you teach, they know masturbation and then may masturbate. This is the parents' concern. So in 2017, there was a big debate in China Weibo about a textbook. One of the issue is masturbation, and people have very different opinions about that, how to teach masturbation in primary school. For my opinions, I think masturbation is the normal behavior during the development for children. So they should know what the feelings when they touch their body, how to evaluate this kind of feelings, and how to recognize their feelings and respect their feelings. That is one of the CSE topics they should know. So we train teachers to teach about this topic. Some of the teachers feel uncomfortable to teach about this masturbation issue, but we train them and let them know what the meaning for to teach masturbation for children, and they realize the important things. Then they can teach, and also they feel comfortable and confidence to teach that kind of topics in classroom. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Osmo.
Okay, I would like to ask Margarita. You had a very inspiring presentation and you have been fighting a lot in Greece to implement your work in Greece. So what would you say to our educators around the world? If there are problems, if they are facing resistance for sex education, what is the first step that they could probably take to move forward in their work?
Well, I should say that they have to find alliances. They have to try to find people who have been either working in organizations or in schools, and they try to not to feel alone, because no one can do anything by him or herself. So the most important is for the people, for the sex educators, for the people who really struggle to introduce comprehensive sex education, is to make links. and try to be vocal and try to have a presence in the media, the local media, in the schools, and try to promote, and try to answer to the opposition, let's say, about it, let's say. So yeah, it's a struggle.
Thank you, Margarita. And as we are nearing the end of this session, and with so many unanswered questions, because these are the great challenges, but I must say that one very encouraging thing is that what has come out of this session is that there is a strong community, and that there is a strong community and alliances between international organizations, governments, academia, and civil society. This is absolutely fundamental for advancing CSE. And just to wrap up, could I ask each one of our great panelists to summarize in 1 or 2 words, what can we do to move forward the progressive CSE agenda? So could we have a very quick overlook of this? Margarita?
Well, never give up.
2 words.
Yes, never give up. 3.
Fantastic. Wen-Lee?
Go ahead.
Robert?
Evidence, engage.
Again?
Evidence and engage.
Oh, wow, fantastic. Ilya?
Young people, but not only to bring their voices, but to bring them as equal implementers and equal partners with us.
Thank you. Joanna?
Building skills and values. So the values of education in general are the values of CSE.
What a great summary. Osmo, what would you say?
Believe on yourself and your capability.
I would say evidence, but also dream. And let's move forward. So thank you very much. Osmo, would you like to say a final word to our panelists?
Well, I'm very grateful of our really great panelists. This is even better than I could dream about. So you are doing very good work. One question to Elna and Michelle. Do we have any results to our poll questions probably available?
Michelle, will you bring up the results to the poll question, please? Osmo, will you read that?
Is it the parents' duty to provide sexual education for their own children? So it's 88% that said yes. If children are taught about sex, will they go out and do it? We have 3% that say yes, but the evidence and our group of participants says no. Teaching about contraception means you're condoning teenage sex. Yes, 3%, no, 95%. Only traditional biological education should be taught with sex in a biological context. Yes, 5%, no, 94%. School children are too young to understand what sex is all about. And we have 6% of people that say yes, but almost 93% of our audience thinks that no. Government funding of school sexuality education leads to moral decline. Yes, 7%, no, 92%. Teachers are not willing or competent to teach sexuality education to the youth. Yes, 53%, and no, 45%. This is very important because it really points out to strengthen the need capacity of our teachers and CSE providers. CXE education is not compatible with national religious values. Yes, 15%, no, 95%. And sex education is not a part of local cultural traditions. 30% said yes, no, 70%. Finally, sexuality education is not needed in school because sex is only for married couples. 1% of our audience says yes, and 99% says no. So these are the results, and this again shows how we're moving forward, and also showing that there are some people that still uphold traditional values. So thank you very much. We are just in time to finish. I cannot say how grateful we are to all this fantastic group and for all the insights they have brought us today. And we look forward to continue working together in WAS Sexuality Education, Comprehensive Sexuality Education. It's one of our main areas of work and access, and it will be highlighted in our next Congress in South Africa, and of course, online. So please keep connected, and thank you again very, very, very much to all our group, and Osmo particularly to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Esther, thank you for ending this in such an engaging way with those two words. I think that shed very interesting light on this topic. And it's really been wonderful to be in the presence of greatness today. And I would hope to see all of you involved in our upcoming conference in South Africa. The conference will be from 9 to 12 September 2021 in Cape Town. But as Esther said, we'll also have an online version of it. And I would also like to invite all of you to become members of WAS. Please become part of our family. And then just to invite you guys to the conference, we are going to, or to South Africa particularly. We know that travel is challenging, but we are going to play a special video to invite you to South Africa. And once again, to all of the panelists, thank you so much from my side.
South Africa, a country on the tip of Africa, where the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean meet. Here you'll meet the biggest smiles of your biggest fans, all 57 million of us. You'll come face to face with the unexpected and be unexpectedly surprised. You'll meet great minds and you'll meet new ideas. Shared over interesting plates mixed with glasses of different opinions, you'll meet your dancing feet and your inner child. You'll meet inspiration at every single turn. You'll meet an energy unlike in any other place, in the very place where our humanity began. Come meet the biggest experiences of your life, and you'll meet a piece of yourself that will be forever changed. South Africa. Meet here, grow anywhere.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for playing that. And I would like to invite you to our next session, which will be the last one for the year, that will be on the research on sexuality and sexual health in the COVID-19 pandemic. Please do join us for that. And I would really want to thank Esther and Osmo again for all of your hard work to put all of this together. I see our President Pedro's camera is on there. Maybe he just wants to give us the final word. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and welcome to WAS, and join WAS. See you next time.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, everybody.